Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. New office, new room, new space. Today we're going to be going over what happened in the markets, the economy, how to prepare for that upcoming crisis. Remember, the preppers were right. This week, stock market's generally up. We have more fertilizer plants that are closing due to the natural gas situation in Europe. We also have some Bitcoin news, a new kind of product that isn't called NFTs, but SFTs. And we even have the government of the UK warning its citizens about potential blackouts. Let's go ahead and get started. One of the things, first, hi to money. Hello. The dollar has been on an absolute tear. And the peso in Colombia, which is the currency here, has just hit a record low at 4,900. It'll most likely go down to 5,000. So for those of you that have been following me for quite a long time, you guys know I live in Medellin. I've been here for a long time. I think it's been, 9-10 years, something like that. It is an amazing time to come. Super cheap. Definitely recommend it. Overall for the week, stock markets in the US mostly higher in addition to Canada. The markets overall were higher because of good economic news, mostly the earnings from quarter three, right? Remember that in a year, they're the results of corporate companies and generally the way they do numbers, accounting, all that stuff is based on quarters. So you divide by four, there's 4 3-month quarters. There's 4 3-month quarters in the years. And then due to the fact that we had really good numbers, everything just exploded to the upside. Overall for the week, even though we had a good week so far, we have had an overall down market and a not very good market at that. So far, we've had $2.1 trillion that has been eviscerated from Americans' retirement accounts. It's an average of about 25%. And even Elon Musk is saying that the recession could last until spring 2024. I'm going to move money here. Remember that the technical definition for a recession is 2 quarters of negative economic growth. The government tried to change that definition, but technically we are in a recession right now. That's why Elon Musk is saying that. Good news on the Tesla front, the Model Y, which is the kind of mini SUV that Tesla sells, is on track to beat the Ford F-150 in sales globally this year. That's big news because the F-150 in the US anyway is the best-selling vehicle for like the last 20, 30, 40 years. So if Tesla can make that kind of track record on one of their cars, obviously it's going to do really well for the rest of their portfolio. And another thing Elon Musk was alarmed about is being included in a well-known Ukrainian kill list after he has provided Ukraine with the free internet from SpaceX called Starlink. Now he's apparently been placed on a kill list, so he probably doesn't want to go to Europe anytime soon. Your overseas market news, the European market's mostly higher, both Istanbul and Russia taking the crown as the most positive. Obviously, they're more emerging markets, I want to say, so they're a lot more volatile. Latin America mostly higher, Africa and the Middle East mixed, with Nigeria being down over 7%. And in the far east, we have Malaysia at positive 4.62% positive. Bitcoin and crypto space, this is a big piece of news. The IMF, which is the kind of the New World Order bank, right? The International Monetary Fund, they have essentially admitted that central bank digital currencies would let the government control what people spend their money on. I don't know if you guys know, but in China, they have a rationing system, let's call it, a social credit score, where if you jaywalk on a street, you get dinged and then you're not able to go out and you're not able to buy things, or you're limited in the things that you can do. So just imagine this perfect utopia where we're protecting the environment, where you can't buy any meat because meat produces methane, which supposedly affects the climate in a negative way. So you're not allowed to buy any more meat this week. Just imagine that utopia. Isn't it wonderful? That was sarcasm for those of you guys listening on the podcast. The podcast didn't come out last week because we had some issue with the website, but it's fixed now. So you guys can go and listen to the podcast. New NFTs. There's something called, if you guys, I'm going to give you a quick rundown on the NFTs. An NFT is a non-fungible token, which is basically a picture of a monkey, which technically somebody owns, but you could just take another picture of it. Sarcasm. Essentially, a non-fungible token is it can't be transferred without your permission. So it's literally a digital item. You know, we all know about kind of the digital monkeys with iced tea gold chains around their necks that were selling for hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars, which are worth nothing now. But now there's something called SFTs, which are semi-functional, semi-fungible tokens. And this is kind of what I've always considered the future to be, because I don't think the future is Bitcoin. I think it's the blockchain. And I still think it's ironic. Remember, here comes more conspiracy Marcello. Remember that they never found the guy who started Bitcoin. So I think it's probably some CIA tech that they needed to refine in the public markets. And then now the CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies, which I very lovingly call government coin, they are going to be the future. And basically they use that blockchain technology. So with that blockchain technology, obviously we had the NFTs. Now we have the SFTs, which are semi-fungible, meaning that imagine like a concert ticket where you buy it, but you can resell it before the concert happens, and then you can't sell it after the concert is over. So these are the kind of things that are going to come out. For example, airline tickets, right? Those are going to be semi-fungible or non-fungible, because you're going to buy a ticket, you're going to be able to refund it, cancel it, but then after the flight is over, you won't be able to transfer it or do anything with it. October is on track, and as I mentioned to you guys a million times when I do these videos, to be the worst month yet for digital assets stolen in history. About $718 million of 11 hacks. Underscores the dangers of the world and decentralized finance. Obviously, there's a lot. Everything has positives and negatives. Just keep an eye out there for those hacks. Bitcoin overall lower for the week, just down 0.11% at just a touch over 11,000. It's still negative almost 59% in 2022 and negative over 68% year over year. UK's national grid is being warned by British. Let me start over. The British government essentially warned households in Britain that on quote unquote really, really cold days in January and February, that they are probably going to have blackouts due to the situation in energy. Another communications cable was cut in France. If you guys don't know, the fiber optic internet cables, most of them are run through the seafloor, very similar to the Nord Stream pipeline. If you guys remember, that was blown up. So now there's been a lot more sabotage or terrorism events where people are starting to cut those cords, which affected, the internet in France, but since has been fixed. I think these kind of things are going to happen more and more and more. Yara, which is one of the big fertilizer production companies in Europe, has decided to close another plant due to the fact that they're not able to produce the fertilizer due to the cost of energy. It simply just doesn't make money anymore. And so now they're going to have a big problem, because remember, since 2020, we talked about here when I was doing these videos about the potential and now kind of certain food shortages that we're going to have. Now that's going to be exacerbated by the fact that they can't produce the fertilizer to put on the crops, right? So this is all going to come to a very, very bad end. They aren't alone either. If you guys remember, we talked about steel producers, yarn factories, yarn like cloths, are all starting to shut down as well. On Monday, the Chinese government told their state-owned gas importers to stop reselling liquefied natural gas to be able to go ahead and save for their own supply, their domestic supply in China. So this is starting to become a situation where countries are starting to kind of reserve things for their own. And this is kind of how wars start. And on Monday, ExxonMobil left $4 billion of a expropriated oil fields in Putin after they decided to just go in and take it. They had a 30% stake in the project, but now it is valued at zero. U.S. commercial inventory for distillates, which means diesel, used trucks, locomotives, jet planes, agriculture, construction, and even excavation equipment, is at its lowest level since 1951. So if we have a situation where we run out of diesel or there's shortages of diesel, then the shortage situation is going to get even worse, because the United States is very different than Europe, where we don't send things by train. We send everything by truck, right? The semi trucks. And that means diesel. So that's going to be a big problem if we end up not recouping those reserves. Estimated 80 to 90% of all Russian oil is now continuing to flow, even though they're trying to push the price caps on through the G7. G7 being, most of the countries in the West, more of these sanctions that don't really work. U.S. crude and Brent on opposite sides this week. The U.S. crude, went down 0.65% to just a touch over $85, and Brent went up by 2.04% to 93.50. The dollar receded just a little bit this week after the huge tear that it's been on over the last few weeks and months. For that reason, gold and silver went up. Gold is up 0.76% to 1,658, while silver went up over 6% to 1952. This is mainly due to the fact that the Japanese government started to intervene with their yen. They started trying to prop up the yen, which is the currency of Japan, and that allowed the dollar to come down a little bit. Financial and banking news. Credit Suisse Group is moving forward to sell its U.S. asset management business. They've taken a $5 billion loss in their collapsing investment arm, Archegos. If you guys remember, they went bankrupt last year. Corporation tax in the UK is now going to increase to 25% as originally planned under Boris Johnson, rather than remaining at the same level as it is now, which is, remember that the Prime Minister, Liz Truss, has resigned. So now, after 45 days, she is the shortest serving Prime Minister in the history of the UK. And even though she's the shortest serving and practically didn't do anything, she's still going to get over £100,000 a year for the rest of her life in severance. You see how the government just doles out money and we wonder why we have problems? New Zealand consumer prices rose 7.2% in quarter three compared to last year in quarter three. The Japanese yen weakened past 150 on Thursday at a level not seen since August 1990, which again is another tear for the US dollar, just continues to explode. And the Germany Federal Statistic Office said that the producer prices, meaning that the cost to produce a service or the cost to produce a product, went up by 45.8% annually in September. Remember that Germany is the largest economy in Europe, fourth largest overall in the world. In political news, speaking at the opening of the 20th Party Congress, the President Xi Jinping is going to most likely win an unprecedented third term, which is going to be another 5 years. It's going to be one of the longest running. He's going to have power, unrivaled power, basically. And the previous the previous president was literally escorted out of the meeting, and that's not really reported by the media, but he's the most powerful, let's call him an emperor instead of a president, since 1976 when Chairman Mao died. Giorgia Meloni, which is the right-leaning Italy's new prime minister, said that her new right-wing coalition is going to be pro-NATO and fully part of Europe. I mentioned the information about Liz Truss, and the state of Arizona in political news as well is refusing a federal government demand to take down the double-stacked shipping containers that are filling the gaps on the border wall, saying that they're not going to take them down until they construct a permanent barrier. Canada's Prime Minister places a nationwide freeze on the sale, purchase, or transfer of handguns effective immediately. Remember that governments always do that, and what happens right after is tyranny. Hugo Chavez, the dictator in Venezuela, took away the guns right after he came into power. Adolf Hitler, luckily in the United States, whatever side you lean with, we still have the right to bear arms. Boston University, and this is crazy, Boston University created a COVID strain with an 80% mortality in mice, meaning that 80% of the mice died. You kind of wonder what really happened with that pandemic in the first place. And a pro-vax bodybuilder who dared anti-vaxxers to use him as a test case has died. Super healthy. If I'm not mistaken, he was 63 years old, just absolutely jacked. And so now we kind of know the truth about hopefully, I'm sure they'll report he died of natural causes. Economic news, the U.S. home building fell by more than expected in September. The number of new houses breaking ground tumbled to the lowest level in the last 2 years. In corporate news, the COVID jab has been added to the childhood vax schedule, which has led obviously to the bastards at Pfizer to raise the price of the vax by over 400%. Circle K is going to start selling marijuana in Florida stores in 2023. It's in collaboration with a company called Green Thumb Enterprises, which has presence in 15 states, and Florida is the second largest market of marijuana after California, believe it or not. Shares of major U.S. banks in corporate news rallied on Monday. Again, those great corporate results, which allowed the market to go higher this week. China's biggest electric car maker, BYD, announced Q3 profit that quadrupled higher. It went up by 4 times. It extends and leads, at least in China, over Tesla. Their shares have gone up or 5.8% on Monday. And Generac, which was on a tear earlier this year with their stock, has finally come back down. They went down 25.34 points, and now it's down to $110 the stock. And Amazon Web Services announced that they want to create a tech hub in Bangkok, Thailand. And the idea is that they want to go ahead and create a hub for the whole region to be able to allow people to purchase their goods and services, obviously from Amazon, but also have their web services there as well. In trade news, in Japan, they're going to impose additional sanctions against North Korea due to the situation with the missiles that they exploded or they sent over Japan into the sea. And then in technology, we have a new analysis led by researchers at the University of California that finds that the 2020 wildfires were the worst on record. 2 times the amount of greenhouse gas emissions were sent into the Earth's atmosphere than the reduction of California emissions from 2003 to 2019. Now, just imagine, you guys probably don't know this, but we've had a lot higher events of volcanoes going off. And so if we supposedly release so much emissions in the atmosphere that we're affecting the environment, then probably should take care of the forest there in California, because they emit a lot more emissions than we do. The Black Death, which started in the late 1340s, which is single greatest mortality event in history, killing some 50% of Europeans in the last 5 years. They found that the genetics of people that got the disease and survived actually changed the genetic makeup of people in their immune systems to allow them to survive the disease easier in the future. Even today, they're able to tell that, which is actually pretty interesting. European Space Agency announced that they're going to use SpaceX Falcon 9 rockets to launch 2 scientific missions because they can't get their own rockets going, and they're not able to use the Russian ones because of the whole situation with Ukraine. And investment news, U.S. rapper Kanye West, Yeezy, he is going to buy a Nashville-based Parler, which is a Twitter competitor. They're one of the many social media firms which supposedly are claim to be free speech. There's others like Getter, Gab, and Truth Social as well. And international events, French unions began a nationwide strike on Tuesday, asking for higher wages due to the situation with inflation. Macron, which is the president of France, says that he is going to have one of his toughest challenges now with the re-election in May. And Moscow this week, I normally don't report a lot of stuff about the war because I figured it's kind of overkill, right? It's all over the news. They're shoving it down our throats. But this week I saw that one thing that was heartbreaking was that Moscow fired over $500 million of cruise missiles just on Monday after the bridge attack. So hopefully that situation will get sorted soon. Unusual facts, a team of Austrian and Greek archaeologists in South France have supposedly found the Temple of Poseidon, recorded by the ancient Greek writer Strabo. That's actually pretty interesting. And last but not least, a gentleman that was eating clams discovered a button-like and purple pearl when he was eating his food. They almost sent the food back. The chances of actually finding a pearl are 1 in 10,000, and he found it at a local restaurant in Delaware. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. If you guys have any questions, leave them with the hashtag AskMarcello. We'll see you next week.